All right, thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching TVC News, and it's still our ongoing special coverage of Ondo Decides 2024. As you must have been following, voting has since commenced in Ondo State, I should say, where we have a number of candidates vying for the big seat in Alagbaka House. And of course, from the reports we're getting on the field from our various personnel who are bringing us minute by minute updates, it's going so far so good. There's some hitches here and there, but you know, the election observers and officials and all the other partners are very much on course, and will continue to keep you updated with all the happenings in Ondo State. Let's bring in our next crop of analysts. Of course, Biodun Shomi is still with us. We thank you very much for your contribution so far, and we having to, have you further. We appreciate.
My pleasure.
Indeed. Thanks a lot again. And Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst, joins us from our Abuja studios. We thank you and welcome to the program.
My pleasure. Good afternoon.
Right. Welcome. Indeed. Let's begin with you, Mr. Ojo. So this will not be the first time that you will be observing elections in Ondo State, and it will definitely not be the last for you both. But what's running through your mind in terms of expectations? What are the things that you'd like to see in this election? And are you seeing them already?
Thank you. Yes, I'm seeing them already. I look forward to a peaceful election where there will be no death, where there will be no violence. And thus far, I think information has it that the election has been very peaceful. The bit I watched in the morning also showed that the election started many of the polling units on time, and there was a good turnout in some. There are not so good turnout in others. Again, we have incidents of vote buying, which some arrests have been made about that. Recall that Ondo State has a history of Diboko Sebe, which is the euphemism for vote buying. Just like Ekiti gave us the phraseology of stomach infrastructure. Some arrests have been made about some who were caught with cash in the boot of the car. We've also noticed that the people are very enthusiastic. They are very enthusiastic about today's exercise, and it's about the best democracy offers opportunity every 4 years to renew mandate of a serving political leader or to vote him out of power. And we just look forward to the smooth conduct of this whole exercise. However, the worrisome aspect is that voter inducement and vote buying, which, like I mentioned, is already rearing its ugly head. And we just hope that we will not end up with the best election money could buy. We also look forward to a smooth collation exercise later this afternoon in another couple of hours when the poll will have been concluded. Usually, from my own experience of observing elections since 1999, the voting period is not so much of a concern. Hardly will you have any widespread violence during the day. But the collation is the weakest link in every electoral process. And I was live in Benin City a couple of months ago on September 21 when Edo election held. The off-cycle governorship of Edo held. And you find out that when the night comes, you start hearing of, collation was not held at the appropriate places, or the word collation was taken to local government collation because of fear of attack on the War Collation Center and all of that. And I've said on the sister TV station earlier today, if the Nigerian police is claiming to have deployed a commissioner per local government, and that means 18 police commissioners supervising the Ondo election, there is we should not hear of a situation where collation process was truncated or could not hold as scheduled. Because what the electoral guideline says is that collation will start from after the announcement of polling unit result. You take the result from there to the World Collation Center, and that is the RAC, Registration Area Center. From there, you take the result to the Local Government Collation Center before the final stage, which is the State Collation Center later. So situations where you now have the INEC officials collapsing or not respecting that procedure, it's not going to be welcome. Collation should take place at designated places, and party agents should be allowed to witness the collation exercise. In Edo State, we had of situations where some party agents were not allowed into the collation centers, and where collation was not held in the designated places because of fear of security threats. That should not happen in Ondo State. And I just hope that INEC will also live to the commitment it made to us in the civil society on October 31, when we had the last quarterly meeting with Professor Mahmoud Yakubu and his commission, where he made commitment to 3 key processes. First is that he promised that the logistic challenge will not rear its ugly head in Ondo, that there will be significant improvement in the movement of poll officials and materials, and that the exercise was going to start as scheduled. That was the first commitment. The second commitment he made to us on October 31 was that the bimodal voter accreditation system device, the BVAS, is going to work seamlessly. And from what we learned last week when they had the mock accreditation exercise, it was judged to be very successful. And we just hope that the BVAS did not malfunction in today's election. The third and the final one is the result management process, where INEC chairman also made commitment that the due process will be followed in the uploading of results on the INEC result viewing portal, that's IREV. And I did remember responding to the INEC chairman's remarks on that day. I represented the civil society at that meeting. And when I was asked to respond to the chairman's, I actually did flag the issue of situations where we see clear case of overvoting being uploaded, results of overvoting polling units being uploaded on the IREV portal, and then where cancelled result is also uploaded. These are not something that should be on the IREV portal, and I just hope that due process, because there are separate forms that should ordinarily have been filled and uploaded where there is cancellation either due to violence or overvoting. Such result is not supposed to be uploaded on the IREV. But what we saw in Edo was that you see cancelled result, you see clear case of overvoting.
All right, Mr. Jide Ojo, apologies for the interruption. We'll come back to talk some more with you and our other analysts about the ongoing election in Ondo State. But in the meantime, we'll take a break and like to let our viewers watching on our sister channel, that's TVC, that we will be pulling out. But of course, the program continues on our other platforms, including YouTube. So you can, of course, go on there and continue to watch and monitor our coverage. We'll be back after the break. Stay with us.
Information is power, information is security, information is knowledge. On Labor Lens, we believe that working people around the world have real questions of their own. They want to know how the world of work operates, what it means to the employer of labor, how policies affect workers in the workplace. On Labor Lens, I ensure we engage effectively the organized labor, organized private sector, and government to get out of them information workers are in need of. I am Sharon Ijason, asking questions that make you get sense of the workplace.
All right, thanks a lot for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. Let's continue our coverage of the ongoing election in Ondo State. But before that, my colleague, Wingar Oreshego, is here. Good to see you again.
Exactly.
Right. The other show, me, is also here with us in the studio for more analysis of the ongoing exercise. And we have, as well, we've been hearing from Jude Ojo, who is joining us from our Abuja studios. Also, Adewale Adeoye is with us in our Abuja studios. We thank you very much, Mr. Adeoye, for joining us at this time. Let's have your assessment of the ongoing program, ongoing voting in Ondo State. Mr. Jude Ojo made an interesting point as to the difference between the voting process and the collation process. In his view, the collation period process is the one that's usually fraught with uncertainties, with disruptions, and he's urging INEC to do the needful so we don't have that episode this time around.
Well, first of all, I think one thing we need to take home from this election in Ondo State is the fact that democracy represents the best system of government, irrespective of the imperfections associated with democratic norms. It still remains the best form of government for Nigerians and for most societies all over the world. There was an election in Ondo State 4 years ago. The people have been presented with another opportunity to choose their leaders out of their prior free and informed consent. There are imperfections, just like no system is perfect. But I think we should continue to stick to democracy as one of the best forms of government, and that, you know, is a concept that is, you know, becomes perfect over time. You know, we have to engage the process continuously and hoping that every year we improve on our shortcomings. And also referring to those states, it's an off-season election, and I think that if you look at the history of the people of Ondo State, even though we are talking about the Boko 7, the fact of the matter is that Ondo State people are a fiercely democratic people. They have a fiercely democratic culture. If you look at elections that have held, you know, since 1960s, 1964, 1965, 1983, you know, Ondo Ekiti axis have always been axis of resistance against undemocratic principles. People have laid down their lives to ensure that they defend democracy. So the idea of corruption is a new sociology, you know, in the culture and heritage of the people. And I think this is something that was brought by politically exposed persons. It's not part of the heritage of Ondo State people. So when we are talking about what we are having in Ondo State now, the election that is going on, I think it has been largely peaceful. And we must also admit that over the past years, we have made progress in terms of beavers, in terms of rendering useless the idea of snatching ballot papers, in terms of overvoting. You know, there are a lot of progress that have been made, though there are a lot of imperfections. So I think one of the imperfections we have now is the issue of corruption, which happens before, during, and after the election. When we are talking about corruption before the election, it has to do with political parties, their primaries, and the process of emergence of their candidates. And also we are talking about people being, you know, campaigning, using a lot of incentives, material incentives before the election. Then during the election, we have realized that even though we cannot see people sharing money physically, you know, money is actually being shared, you know, by other means, either through crediting people's accounts or, you know, giving them money after the voting process has taken place. And also after the election, which has to do with state institutions, state actors, INEC, and also the, you know, state or other state institutions that are involved in collating, you know, election results. But I think by and large, we are making progress, and we should also notice that there is no fundamental increase in terms of number of registered voters. In 2002, we had about 1.6. Now, in 2024, we're having just about 1.7. So a marginal increase of about 100,000 voters. But the fact of the matter is that when we have registered voters of about 1.7, you know, by the time you collate the results, you discover that, you know, you have probably less than 1 million who actually vote on the day of the election. So there is, you know, a challenge in terms of the gap between registered voters and the people that come out, you know, during that election to cast their votes. That we really need to address. Does it mean that for other means, just because maybe they think that they might need it to, you know, they might need that voter card, you know, in other ways, not necessarily for the election? Or does it mean that the political parties are not doing enough to sensitize the people, to let them appreciate the need for them to cast their votes? Or do they, is it that the people are thinking that their votes no longer count? So these are major challenges that I think we need to address. But I think as it is now, Nigeria is making progress. We are not moving backward. We will be moving slowly. And I believe at the fullness of time, we are going to address some of these situations that we are, you know, expressed today.
You talked about voter inducement. Now, in all of this, how do we phase it out?
Business mogul, you have someone like the King Sunny Ade, who is a juju music maestro. You have someone like you know, Dr. Orlando Owo, who did the state proud for many decades before his demise. So the biggest resource that Ondo has is the human resource. In fact, there are states saying in certain quarters that the dominant candidates in the current elections are about the least educated in Ondo, on the history of Ondo State in the last 25 years. Because this is a state where you have, you know, Dr. Dr. Olusegun Agagu, who was a university don, being the governor for about 7 years actually, from 2003 to 2009. You have someone like Olusegun Mimiko, who is a medical doctor. You have Adebayo Adefarati, who also was an illustrious son, being the first executive governor in this fourth republic. You have Accreditation Oluwarotimi, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, who died on December 27 last year. So when you look at Agbola Ajayi and the incumbent governor, Lucky Ayedatiwa, when you look at their academic credentials, they are about the least in terms of the potential governor of Ondo State. So Ondo is blessed with human capital. That's the summary of my statement. It's blessed with huge human capital, huge agricultural arable land, and then the oil and gas, not forgetting the solid mineral. So those are the potentials. But what Ondo is crying for is the person that will turn around these potentials into development, huge development for the state. Because, you know, potentials are just what they are. You may have potentials to achieve X, Y, Z. If you don't have a good manager of resources, it remains what it is. It remains latent, it's dormant, But if you have someone who can turn the potentials into, mold it into development, then you see sufficient and impressive development across Ondo State. And that's what I look forward to, that whoever among the 18 candidates, whoever gets to win and be the next occupier of Alagbaka Government House in Ondo State, come February 24, 2025, I hope he will be able to turn these potentials into development, because that is what the people of Ondo State are craving for. They want development. They want infrastructural development. They want, peaceful coexistence. They want betterment for their own life, security and welfare for themselves.
Now, I like the fact that you talked about the potentials of these great states, Ondo State, bitumen, second largest deposit, I think, in the world. But why is it so difficult that it is for leaders, maybe past governors, and probably the next one, to actually harness these things, to actually meet the demands of Ondo State, the people in Ondo State? You talked about, earlier, I think it was this morning, they talked about the fact that there are a lot of bad roads in that state. Why is it so difficult? Or is it that the people are asking for too much that the leadership cannot meet?
My brother, the challenge is basically like I said. Unfortunately, Accreditation, Oluwarotimi Accreditation, in the last 2 years had been bogged down by ill health so much that throughout last year, 2023, he couldn't do much in terms of governance. For about 6 months, he was away to Germany trying to take care of his health. When he came back, he couldn't even come to Akure. He had to stay in his house in Ibadan, where he eventually passed. I don't know whether he passed in Ibadan, but he never really come back from the time he traveled abroad for medical tourism. He never came back to Akure to govern. So in the last 2 years, there have been leadership vacuum, so to speak. And you don't also want to blame Lucky Aiyedatiwa, who has been in the saddle for the past 1 year. He met a lot of challenges. The vacuum created by the health challenge of Aketi. Recall that throughout last year, it was just Lucky Aiyedatiwa was just lucky not to have been impeached. When his principal was away to Germany, the aides and lieutenants of Aketi, that's Oluwarotimi Akeredolu, did not cooperate with Aiyedatiwa to make him substantive governor. He was still seen as a deputy governor without executive powers. And when he tried to reach out, when he tried to be his own man, to try to work, in fact, to even summon state executive council meeting, it was resolved. And the next thing is political traducers, file the allegations of gross misconduct against him, asking the Chief Judge of Ondo State to empanel a commission of inquiry that will see to his exit. But the luck Aiyedatiwa has was that the Chief Justice, the Chief Judge of Ondo State, was able to stick by the rule of law, because Aiyedatiwa's camp was able to get a court injunction to prevent its investigation and impeachment. And the woman, I don't know whether it's a woman who was the chief judge, said, look, my hands are tied, I have to respect court order. That was the saving grace until eventually he was made the acting governor. He became substantive governor on December 27, and perhaps the backlog of challenges that he met did not allow him to do much. But coming to the issue of the exploration of solid minerals in Ondo State, don't forget there is a challenge between the Land Use Act and the laws governing solid mineral prospects in Nigeria. The land is vested in the state, but the resources on the land the resources that are in the land is vested in the federal government. So you have any state that want to explore the mineral resources in his backyard or in his land, we have to first get license from the Abuja, from the Ministry of Solid Mineral. And that creates a huge challenge for them, because this whole argument about resource control has been an age-long controversy, where people say, we have oil and gas in our backyard, we have solid mineral in our backyard, but we cannot explore it, and we have to get license from the federal government to explore the resources that are in the land where we control. And that is why the agitation continues about resource control, about true federalism, about fiscal federalism, where people are saying, let states be in control of their resources and let them pay royalty to the federal government, which was a practice, from what I read, in the First Republic, particularly up to the 1960, between 1960 and 1966, where states, the regions, were in control of their resources and were paying royalties to the federal government, as it were. But now everything has been nationalized, and that's why we have said the 68 items on the exclusive legislative list, there's a need to have a restructuring. Let's have a restructuring where there is devolution of powers. And one of the issues, even though this devolution has started under Buhari administration, because it was the last constitutional alteration that have now brought electricity from the exclusive legislative list to concurrent legislative list, it has now brought railway from exclusive legislative list to concurrent legislative list, and has also brought electricity from the exclusive legislative list and then the prison, that's a correctional center, is now under the concurrent list. I hope that we can also have solid minerals coming from the exclusive to concurrent legislative list, so that the state can be in control of their resources truly and genuinely, whether it's oil and gas or it is solid minerals. They can explore and then pay royalty to the center. That way, the states will have more resources to develop the infrastructure within their state. Okay. Because as it is now, given the new minimum wage, many states are crying that they could not pay the minimum wage of 70,000 because it has exponentially increased the amount that they were using, more than double the amount they were using previously in payment.
Right, we'll come back to that point, but let's also get some more reactions on this issue of giving Ondo residents what they voted for is essentially, and perhaps that would also explain, Mr. Wale Adeoye, this amount, the level of interest, by the the hopefuls, people, those men or those individuals who are vying for the big seat in Ondo State, about 18 of them, 17 of them or thereabout. In terms of Ondo is a state that, is attractive, but then what are we getting instead? And now this is another opportunity for us, hopefully, to get, a state that better serves its people. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think the expectations of the people are justifiably very high. We're in a situation where poverty has become a household trend. People can hardly afford 3 square meals. So I think the expectations of the people of Ondo State are high. What we don't know is if these expectations will be met by whoever emerges as the governor of the state, because of the precedents that has been set over the years. If we look at Ondo State, they have had experiences of good governance. For instance, Agashin, who was governor for just 4 years, within that very short period, was able to leave milestones. He established the Oluwa glass industry, he established a brick industry, Yes, he established, he also established Owena Holdings and then palm oil industry within a very short time. And he also set up a university in 1982, just less than 2 years after coming to power, which was named Obafemi Awolowo University, but later changed to Ondo State University by the military government of Buhari. So if you look at the legacy that we have seen over the years, the people have had very good experiences. The difference between those old leaders and the current one is that the leaders of those days, for instance, Agashin, by the time he left power in 1983, had only a very obsolete upstairs located in Owo. He had no land holdings anywhere all over the world. He had no private estate anywhere all over the world. He lived a very modest and diligent life. To the extent that even when the military government set up panel of inquiry, nothing was found against him. He lived for the people. And he had a consortium of experts that were taking decisions for him. And he picked his commissioners, not driven by favoritism, but based on merit. So his primary focus was, the focal point was on the people. But these days we have a situation where political parties, first of all, focus on political party members. Then the second on the scale of preference are elected political officials or appointed political officials. And that's why we find a situation where whenever they come to power, the first thing is that, the first is to buy new cars for commissioners, for members of the House of Rep. For members of the House of Assembly. So the least on the ladder is the people. So when you find a situation where the first is to invest on governor, the cost of governors, then before you even think of the people, there is no way that the people can benefit, overwhelmingly from such a system. Ondo State is a very rich state. What is happening is the poverty of ideas or people that have left them probably largely since 1999. Ondo State has bitumen deposits of 42 billion, the largest deposit in the world. It has one of the largest coastlines in Nigeria, about 75 kilometers. So we are talking about maritime economy that can change, the entire landscape. We are talking about cocoa. Ondo State used to be the best in terms of production of cocoa, which has been taken over now by Ivory Coast. At that time, the UPN, Unity Party of Nigeria, under Agashi, had a ranching located at Akono in the Akoko area. And in this area, they were breeding cows that was able to feed almost the entire southwest. So we are not even talking about importing cows from any part of the, of the southwest. Ondo State was one feeding, the region. And when you see what is happening now since 1999, I can tell you that what Agashi achieved in just 4 years, I don't think we have been able to surpass, that milestone. I recall that when he came in, he tripled the number of secondary schools. And then he set up a special budget for provision of, free textbooks and uniforms for students. And then there was no payment of tuition. And then they set up what they call special grants for secondary schools. That if, you have a secondary school, there are grants that can be used, by the schools. And there was free education, free access, public health, was almost, that anybody can access in Ondo State just for a period of 4 years. We have not seen a repeat of, those kind of achievements, since 1999. So I think whoever is going to take over the mantle of leadership in Ondo State, first of all, needs to go back to history to see what his predecessor achieved, especially using Agashi as a yardstick. For the 4 years, what he was able to achieve for the people. And that was why when that election was rigged in 1983, people who went on the streets, they were there to lay down their lives because they knew that, their destiny was about to be taken away from their hands. I don't think our voters today can, take any risk for the current political leadership because there is a communication gap. There is a kind of wide gap, between the people and those that are governing them. And they don't have a reason why they think that they should have absolute trust, in the kind of political leadership that we have today. So I think our leaders need to realize that the greatest human resource is your brain. The ability to think critically, to understand the fears and aspirations of people, and the will to address them, putting your own interests as the last on the scale of preference.
All right, Adewale Ade, well said. But really, are the people that enlightened to intelligently demand for their rights from their leaders?
The people of Ondo State are enlightened. What does it mean to be enlightened? To know what you think is of your best interest. That is what it means to be enlightened. They know that their children need to be educated, if possible, free of charge. They know that their children need jobs, even when you do not go to school at all. These are basic essentials of life that you know that you need: clothing, housing, feeding. So when these fundamental elements are denied, you know that your rights have been taken away from you. And if you go to the social media, a build up to this election, you can see that there's a quantum of demand from people of Ondo State, which some of us had the privilege of monitoring, to say that, look, these are the challenges that people are looking for, that want you to address them. Unfortunately, during the campaigns have become a kind of ceremony. It has become a kind of ritual where people just go there and dance. Women they are used as entertainment objects. The politicians fail to campaign on critical issues like environment, agriculture, on education, on economy. So it has become a kind of ritual where people just go and beat drums and then shout, make noise, dance, and then go away. But I think there is a silent majority of our people who are conscious about this deficiency and are making that demand that, look, these are not the kind of things that we want. I believe that this is partly responsible for the diminishing number of voters that we are recording, especially in a place like Ondo State, where you have a retinue of highly educated people, where education is one of their greatest industries. So I think the people are enlightened. They know what they want. But it's another thing for you to be enlightened. It's a completely different thing that to make certain demands that, but your leaders don't think those demands are important.
All right, let's come back to the studio. Mr. Shomi, one of the aspects of fiscal federalism that Jide Ojo talked about is some of the ideals that he would like to see. But what we are seeing already is Amotekun. And in Ondo State, that has been, on ground for the past couple of years or so, especially during Aketi's reign, the late Rotimi Akeredolu. What would you like to see moving forward? Because we are still seeing a lot of states, struggling with this concept of enhancing security for their residents, using their own, modified, their own using those peculiarities to enhance security for residents. In terms of what Ondo has been able to achieve and what is left for them to do moving forward, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we've seen the progress made when Aketi was in power. That's the late Governor Akeredolu. We saw how Amotekun came into being. We knew the problem they were faced with, big problem with security, particularly allegations against nomadic farmers, destroying their farms. So they created Amotekun in conjunction with other state governors in the southwest here. And one way or the other, they've been able to curtail the problem to a manageable level. Even now, it's not as severe as it used to be. Yet there are still some concerns, but not as bad as what it used to be. Of course, the next step is to move further from there, develop state police. Don't just stop at Amotekun, which is like a vigilante system created by law. I know other states have their own forms of one thing or the other. I think Ogun is a so safe corps or something.
Yes, so safe.
Yeah, so what you really need to develop them into proper institutions so that they can get proper training. We can hold them to the highest possible standards, make them thoroughly professional. And that's the way to go. And in that situation, they will be able to at least reduce crime, in their own environment. And that will create the enabling environment for farmers to be able to plant more crops to get us out of the woods. But
the argument, again, would be, like we are seeing now, Amotekun is not, operational, at least during the election. When the IGP gave the order, it was, in a bid to ensure that there is no bias and no party, besides the ruling party's crying foul that, you know, the Amotekun Corps is being used, you know, against their own interests. And those are the concerns primarily for those who are not exactly excited about the concept of state police. So how do we, you know, work around these concerns and ensure that when they come on ground, we've seen the federal government already, you know, having an, you know, an open mind towards the concept of state police and is waiting for states to come up with their own agenda to giving this concept life. But, you know, for the concerns of those who think that it might just be a tool in the hands of the ruling party of that state, what do we do from that?
They only need to go back. When, in 1979, when Awolowo contested election, people should remember the role, the allegations made against the Nigerian police force. It went on until 1983 also, the same situation. We've always been having these allegations made against people, security agencies responsible for elections. Even before, nobody was even thinking of state police at that time. We went on, we've not been able to solve the problem. Society started breaking up. We were faced with each problem. We had insurgents occupying 15, 18 local governments. Things became so bad to the level that we've never seen it under the same federal policing system. Under the same federal policing system, trust deficit existed. Very severe. And it's not only that, till today, there are still allegations being made against the police. I'm not saying whether they are right or not. That's not what I'm saying. But that you'll always have these suspicions, one way or the other. Now, what will be done differently? If the Nigerian current federal policing system has been able to solve the problem, nobody will be talking about state police. It's simply because the federal policing system has not been able to solve the problem. They are highly underfunded, that state governments have to come in. You now have all manners of outfits, which to me are like state police. You know, you have RRS, QRS, all manners of SRRS or something, all over the whole place, being kitted, funded, including guns and armored vehicles being bought by the state government. So what will change? They are available to be used by state governments currently. So why not have a proper policing system and situate them within the community to protect people and protect lives and property? I don't see what difference it will make. If anybody wants to abuse security, they will always do it anyway, whether it's the military, whether you are a civilian, whether you state police or federal police, people will do it if they want to do it. The question is, when you do it, what happens? Is when you don't have consequences, you know, trailing those actions, that is when people do it and get away with it and people begin to lose trust in the system. So for me, we live in a federation, supposedly in a federation. So it is an integral part of federalism, you know, that we should have state police. Because when you have the federating units, you have the coordinating center. There is no way under the principles of true federalism that the states cannot have their own police force. We've been practicing, don't forget, since Civil War, we've been on this unitary system. Crime has been going up, not coming down. Even society is getting to the point that society is being threatened from left and right. If it's not Maitasini today, it's Boko Haram tomorrow. If it's not Boko Haram, it's something they now call Salikuwa or something. Very strange name. So then what do we gain from that? Why do you keep maintaining, you know, doing the same thing the same way and you are getting the wrong result? Why do you want to continue to do it and think you get a different result? Except we have to change what we are doing. There's nothing wrong with the state police. There's nothing wrong with people abusing their powers, either with federal police or state police. What matters is what do we do? Do we allow them to get away with it, or are they pulled up to account for it?
All right. Jide Ojo, perhaps Jide Ojo would want to also lend his voice to this controversy. The issue of abuse of, you know, state security outfits. Let's quickly, you know, have your thoughts on that, and then we talk about other issues bordering around security at the Ondo polls.
Thank you. As Prof said in the studio, there is no institution of governance that is not prone to abuse. is whether we have appropriate checks and balance in place. And I thought by now we would have put a panel, a proper state policing system after the hubris that we witnessed early in the years, where the Nigerian Governors Forum was able to pressure President Bola Tinubu to accede to the establishment of the state police. And what are we afraid of? State police, we have regional police, we have local authority police. In the First Republic, it was this whole agitation about, oh, they were abused and all of that. But go back in history. Was it only the NA police or the regional police that were abused by the political actors of that time? The national police, the federal police were also complicit. Those who perpetrated the electoral fraud of 1964 to 1966 in the Southwest, the people who perpetrated the electoral East in Ondo in 1983 were aided and abetted by the federal police. So what are we talking about? We copied presidential system of government from US. Does United States of America, does it have only one policing system? You see county police, you see state police, you even see the Congress as its own police. The Congress of US has its own police. Several other institutions have their own policing system. There can never be too much of security. The reason why there is no productivity or low productivity today is because the country is under siege of insecurity. We were talking about Ondo State and its potentials. The rationale behind establishment of Amotekun, we must not forget, 2020, 2021, the entire Southwest was under the gulag of terrorists, of killer S-men. Recall that this is part of what led Sunday Igboho to become an ethnic jingoist and a liberator for the people of Igan, the Barakpa area of Oyo State, when the community was under the siege of killer S-men. And people had to resort to self-help. That was why, even when the former Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami SN, was violently opposed to the setting up of regional security outfit, the Accreditation, Oluwarotimi Aketi of blessed memory led the Governors Forum to challenge the legal authority that Malami was relying on to advise Buhari not to support the establishment of a regional security outfit. And at the end of the day, a sound legal argument won, and they were able to extract the commitment of the federal government of Nigeria under Buhari that they can go ahead and establish the regional security outfit, just that it will have every state house of assembly will have to pass a legislation to back up the establishment of Amotekun. And that's how that problem was solved. And today, if you do a Google check, you will find out that Amotekun has been very successful in Ondo State. Okay. So many arrests have been made, so many prosecution. Of course, they have to hand over whoever they arrest to the police for proper prosecution. But that is what it should be. There should be synergy between the federal and state police if eventually we have one.
Absolutely. All right, thank you very much. But just hold your thought. We'll get back to you in a couple of minutes. We need to go ahead to speak with one of our reporters on ground, Ayodeji Moradio. Ayodeji Moradio, what is actually going on where you are? How's the process been so far?
Well, I'm at Ilepa in Ikare Akoko, and I can tell you that voting is ongoing and the people are conducting themselves in an orderly manner, and we have have a lot of them behind me. Voting started there, according to some of the people I have spoken with, 8:30 on the dot, and they are still passing the franchise. One thing I noticed at this place is that we have many youth who came out to be part of the voting process. They outnumbered the old people. So we have a lot of them who are still on the queue to vote.
Okay, and also talk to us about the machines used by INEC, the beavers. Has they been working really well? And also the security agencies, have they been impartial? And also, have you had incidents of voter inducement?
Start with the use of beavers machine. I think in this election, the people are commending the Independent National Electoral Commission for doing a yeoman job. The machines are functioning very well in most of the places we have visited in Ikare, in Okiagbe, and Owo. So the machines are working very well. And also, let me tell you that security personnel are everywhere in most of the places we visited. In this particular ward in Lepa, Ward 1, Unit 10, we have many police, at least 3-4 security personnel displayed, monitoring the election, ensuring that there's no breakdown of law and order. So it is
sense of how strategic Ikare Akoko is, especially with the plethora of candidates that we are seeing looking for crucial votes.
Can you come again with the question?
Yes. How strategic is Ikare Akoko, especially as voters continue to troop out to the polling units to vote, and of course the political parties are also seeking these crucial votes to emerge victorious at the end of the day?
Ikare is a big town, it's a strategic town, and we have a large number of votes that will come from this area, and that is why you can see that people really came out to be part of.
All right, Ayodeji, we seem to be having some hiccups getting feedback from your end. Perhaps we'll try to reconnect. In the meantime, let's speak with Mr. Wale Adeoye now. All right, talking about security, we've heard our reporters speaking about how security operatives are on ground. As you also know, Amoteco is not, one of the accredited security agencies during these polls. But then there's been the question of, do we really need this 30-something thousand operatives cutting across the police, the NSCDC, and all the other agencies on ground? Do we really need them to ensure free and fair polls? What do you think?
We have had elections in the past without this monumental investment in security forces. In Ondo State at present, we have 43,000 security operatives that have been deployed, out of which 38,000 are policemen and 6,000 coming from civil defense, and then the DSS, and of course in the riverine areas, the Navy has mobilized boats, with the intention of saying, okay, they want to protect votes in riverine communities. I think in real democratic practice, this is not necessary, because we have to look at the fact that Ondo State is just about 5.3 million people, almost the size of Liberia. We have seen an election that happened in the US recently. How many security operatives were deployed to those areas? And when you are talking about 43,000 security operatives being deployed in off-season election, what is the cost of that deployment? Let's imagine that each of the 43,000 operatives were given 20,000 naira for the 2-3 days. You can imagine the cost. No talk of other logistics, deploying them, mobilizing them, feeding them. And this has to happen in 36 states of the Federation. So this adds up to the cost of governance, that these funds could have been invested in more lucrative ventures that can have meaning in terms of addressing the needs of the ordinary man on the street. So I think we really don't have to deploy as much security as we are deploying today if we are really interested in having democratic governance. At the end of the day, you find out these security operatives practically today that we are talking about beavers, IT-driven elections. They practically have, little or less to do. But when an idea becomes a culture, the idea of funding it becomes business for a lot of people. So there are people who think that, look, the ritual deployment of security operatives is a way, is a means of profiteering from the system. So I don't really think that we need to deploy as much security as we have today. Like we have seen in the US election, each state had to manage its own election without deployment of federal forces. And I just like, Chief Showmi said, we have to practice democracy, federalism according to the dictates of the fundamental principles, as espoused by Immanuel Kant and George Washington. We are trying to borrow federalism from the US. So why is our own version different from what is the practice all over the world? We started federalism in 1939, then 1946 Constitution, where we adopted the principle of federalism. But today, what we are running is a garrison structure. There's no respect for federalism. If we really want to practice federalism, then we should not be talking about deployment of state security operatives to these areas. They are not going to take part in the election. So what is actually their role? So I think that we need to get to a place where we agree that, look, the greatest watchdogs of election are the people themselves. But it's their future that's at stake. And we imagine that, it's not possible. It is possible. We have had it before. Several years ago, we never had armed men policing our polling units. The same thing in Ghana. If you go to Ghana today, you don't have this kind of massive deployment of security. Having, dawn-to-dawn curfew and all that. We don't need that. So that means that we need to ensure a more effective, more people-driven electoral system where people can vote, physically challenged people can vote online, people who are bedridden can vote online, and also we need to create more access to local communities. We find a situation where polling units are far from a lot of communities and they need to travel far. And the cost of mobilizing them, that means there is a form of incentive. If we mobilize, if I'm the one paying for your transport, then you need to, vote for me. So the nuclear creation of polling units, need to be looked at so that more people, people will have more, greater access to polling units, not to travel 2-3 kilometers before they can vote. So I think security that we are talking about now is just it's become more or less like a political economy where some people think that they need to benefit, from the system. So I think we need to work in a system where there will be no need for this massive deployment of, security forces, so that we can have democracy that is free of arms and ammunition, deployment of armor tanks and all that.
Yeah, many people will want to agree with you, like militarization of our elections, it should be done away with. But what do we now do in place of that? What should the country now be doing in place of that? Should we, how do we leverage technology for transparency and participation in Nigeria's election? Looking at some places in Nigeria, they call them ungoverned spaces, where internet penetration is not there, electricity is not even there. How do we go about that?
But Nigeria has refused. Nigeria has refused to tap this advantage, because when you are talking about IT, you can imagine a situation where you have hundreds of millions of Uber drivers, and yet there is an IT to monitor the movement of each driver all over the world. The same thing with boat. So what's the problem of Nigeria? Just about 200 million people. Why is it so difficult for us to have an effective information technology system? It's simple, because some people think that it's not beneficial to them. So if we are really committed to tapping from, information technology, we can do it. It's possible. Look at the challenges some of our banks are having today to transfer funds. It's deliberate because they have to allow, the POS business to be sustained for the interest of a few individuals. So if you are really committed to having an electoral system that is driven by IT, you can do it. It's not a difficult problem. If China, with billions of people, can do it, if India, the most populous country in the world, can do it, we have no excuse to say that we cannot, and we have the experts. If MTN, Globalcom, and all the service providers could run IT that covers millions of people, more than the number of voters that we are talking about, then why is it so difficult for us to have an electoral system that is driven by IT? Just because some people think that they want to benefit from the old civic system of doing things manually. So I think we need to develop that the way. It's not that we don't have the skill. It's not that we don't have the manpower. It's not that we don't have the strength. So we just need to adopt this IT system because that is actually the best way we can have an election that is transparent, that controls global integrity, and also enjoys trust from Nigerians.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Showumi Ojo and Adeoye, let's put you all on hold and check again with another member of our crew who's been our eyes, part of our eyes and ears on ground in Ondo State. Sarah Ayeku, it's been a busy day for you so far. We understand that you are now in Igbotako, the Igbotako area of Okutikukpa local government area. So tell us how have been the highlights of your stay so far?
Kemi, it's very interesting. When we were in Akure, we thought the election was going to be boring because we didn't really feel that there was election today. But coming into the rural communities, you would see that really people at the grassroots understand the political process much more than those who are in the city center. Some persons will argue that maybe those in the city centers have traveled to the rural communities to vote, whether that is true or not. But what we see on the queue is the number of persons. This is well past 1. We're counting down to 2:30, which is the close time for this election. That's the voting process. And you can still see the number of persons still at the polling units. Although at some polling units that we saw before we got to Botako, they were bit empty, but still at some polling units, we still had this crowd, a long queue, waiting to cast, to be accredited, and then to vote at the same time. So if you take a look at the demography, right, you have both the old and the young. And generally, for this election, in Ondo State, we have about 2 million voters, and from that demography, 50% are males, while 47.8% are females. Right? We're not talking about the PVCs collected now. We're looking at the demography of the voters generally, and out of that 2 million voters, the highest demography is, of course, the youths, and they occupy there about 726,944, and that's a huge number, and that's the number we've seen on most of the queues we saw at the various polling units today. I saw an 18-year-old man, right, and he was looking so young on the queue. At some point, we were doubting if this was a case of underage voting, right, until we got to see his voter card. And even I also met a 20-year-old who is a party canvasser, going from one street to the other in the city center that's around Okutikukpa, going to ask people to come out and vote. Of course, she's also voting for a candidate of her choice. And even on the queue, right, you see some really young people on the queue, apart from the women and few men we see around waiting to cast their vote. We see a lot of women at this polling unit. Sadly, we don't have any woman on the ballot paper. I'm going to be going to one woman who I understand has voted, or she's just waiting for the vote to be counted, and she's just sitting right there in front of her house. Mommy, I can't summer. Yes, ma'am. Mo fẹ́ bèrè pé ṣé ti dìbò.
A ti dìbò.
Báwo lẹ ṣe rí bó sí?
A dìbò, ìbò ń lọ ní ìrọwọ́ ní ìrẹsẹ̀, kò sí wàhálà, kò sí ìjà, kò sí kankan ní tiwa. Àṣà àdìbò, àdìgbowó, gbogbo wa, àgbowó, owó tá fi dìbò. Ìyá mi kó ṣe kẹ. Kilo àjífọ́ tèmi o àjífọ́.
Ìbò lọ dáadáa.
Kò sí ìjà kò sí nǹkan kan ìbò lọ dáadáa.
Kí lẹ̀yin fẹ́ kí gómìnà tuntun tó bá máa wọlé ká má tiẹ̀ sọ ẹni tó máa wọlé ná kí lẹ fẹ́ ẹni tó máa wọlé kí lẹ fẹ́ kó ṣe fún ẹ̀yin àti àwọn aráàlú.
Wa ló ń jẹ nǹkan tó lọ sókè yìí kó lọ sódò nǹkan gbogbo lọ sí ìsàlẹ̀ kó lè fún àwọn àgbàlagbà ló ń jẹ dáadáa tá máa jẹ tá ò ní ráhùn ìyẹn ni kó ṣe fún wa o ìyẹn kí ẹni tó bá wọlé kó ṣe fún wa ó fún wa ló ń jẹ.
So we'll try and interpret that, right? So what she's trying to say is that the election has been peaceful so far, and she's voted. This was a polling unit. She has voted, and she's sitting with some of her friends over there, just waiting for 2:30 for them to count the votes. And of course, she has listed, our demands for the next governor, which, of course, topping the list, right, is the economy. How do you take hunger off the table of most of these rural dwellers? Kemi.
Sarah, talk to us. You talked about the young people that you saw on the queue that wanted to vote. When you interacted with them, what is that thing that is motivating them for them to come out to say that, hey, come rain, come shine, we would cast our votes? And also, apart from these persons that you actually interacted with, other places that you visited, the persons you interacted with, were they also satisfied with the conduct of the election?
Sarah, are you there? Hello, Sarah.
Sarah, are you still there? Okay, I think maybe we have...
And that's a crucial question. This bit about, what an elderly person would want might be different from what a younger person.
Exactly.
And yes, we are seeing, so much interest growing, over the polls. Of course, we just finished last general election, the heightened awareness among the youth demographics, especially. And I remember we were in the newsroom when we saw the pictures of, the rather young-looking boys. And when he brought out his PVC, we did the math and saw he was actually 18 years. Absolutely. So he's, at least from the card, 18 years old, and he's eligible to vote. Right. But in terms of just what is needed, just what is crucial in Ondo State, I don't think you got to, give us your overview of your expectation as to the person who will, go into govern Ondo State. What is crucial? And of course, poverty is one of the most paramount needs right now. Alleviating poverty is one big paramount need indeed.
Yes, certainly. With Ondo State, education is number one. Okay. They don't toy with that. A lot needs to be done. Within the state, you also have a huge gap between Akoko South and the other parts, and the two, the Akoko North and Central. Ondo North and Ondo Central. You have that gap between the Ondo South and the other two. So a lot of investment needs to go in, not only to increase the number of schools in Ondo South, but to also ensure that there are standards and all the schools measure up to expectation. So a lot of money needs to go into education. Health is another major challenge. There are some parts of Ondo State that, particularly in the rural areas, access to health centers are highly limited. So a lot needs to be done in that area. Particularly, again, I will refer to Ondo South. Then agriculture. Agriculture is the mainstay, for Ondo's economy. All the idea of going into bitumen tapping will not solve the problem. What will bring down the cost? What we have is our index inflation is driven by food inflation.
Okay.
And the only way to bring down food inflation is not by importing food, it's by producing food.
Exactly.
And Ondo State is a huge state with huge agricultural potentials. In the past, it used to be the cocoa capital for Nigeria.
Yes.
And they have very fertile land to produce yam, they can make a lot of difference. If whoever wins the election invests, in agriculture or create the enabling environment, Ondo State can easily bring down the cost of food from its own production. Whether it's yam you want to talk about, whether it's a vegetable, name it. They can do a lot. People keep forgetting that it's not by government decreeing or you have a price control that you can bring down prices. Price control can only bring down prices if you have, excess of goods within the economy. Where you don't have enough, the usual thing is prices will go up. So for those who are hoping that government will do a lot to bring down prices, I would say, look, it's a shared responsibility. Government has a duty to do that, but we must also be ready to go to the farms. Government must create the enabling environment, ensure there's security. But we on our own part must also be willing to go to the farm, to produce food that we consume.
All right, so we don't keep Sarah and the rest of the crew because, of course, it's a very fluid job that you're doing right now, very crucial, and you're roving. While you're still in Okitipupa, quickly address Benga's question.
Yes.
Did you get that?
Sarah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, now, I asked you, you said you visited some places where you saw some, really young voters, youths, 18-year-old boy. I just want to ask, what is that thing that is actually motivating these young folks to go out there and cast their votes, come rain, come shine? And also, the persons you interacted with, that old woman and her friends, that said, oh, they are satisfied. How about the other places you visited? Were they also satisfied with the conduct of the election?
Well, it's a mixed bag. Let me start from, this question. It's a mixed bag. It depends on where you are on the pendulum. If you are for those who you think are winning this election, because from here already, from the various polling units, you can almost tell where the pendulum is going to swing. But that's particularly for those who are in this particular community. They know who they want to vote for. So they're very decisive about who they want to vote for. So for them, it's a mixed bag. For other communities where there were infractions earlier today, where we saw one of the candidates who complained bitterly about the conduct of the election, where he said that some party agents and some voters had decided or agreed to display the ballot paper after voting, while some voters said, well, it's my right, it's my vote, I can decide to show my ballot paper if I want, So there was that infraction earlier this morning. So for that particular candidate who is on the opposition party, he wasn't really satisfied with that mode of operation, wasn't satisfied with that. And so for people, right, it's a mixed bag. Some persons are happy and some are not. It's an election, it's a race. So whoever comes out victorious, may the best man win. That's what it says. So for now, we still don't know who will emerge. It's a tight race between, of course, the major political parties, and that's the major contenders. A very tight race from what I hear here at the grassroots. And if you ask, really, that where are the votes coming from? If you take a look at the numbers, really, you're talking about, we're looking at Accra South, Ondo West, Ilaje, Owo, Ekutipupa, where I'm at, where we're having close to 100,000, over 100,000 votes come from this local government alone. And we're looking at PVCs collected, not just registered voters. So it's very crucial, and that's why you see this number of persons at the polling units. When you talk about the young persons we've seen at the polling units, it was really inspiring and interesting for me to see an 18-year-old, a 20-year-old lady, actually, not just the male folk. Even the women are coming out, young ladies are coming out to cast their vote and to also canvass for a candidate of their choice. And when I asked the 20-year-old lady, she said that she's tired of what the old folks have done in the past, and she feels that she wants to make a change, and that's why she decided to go into politics, and that's why she has decided to align with a particular candidate. So it's a mixed bag for all of the candidates and even for the voters, and we're just waiting. It's just a few minutes now. We're going to be counting the votes, and then the winner, of course, will be decided at the end of the day.
All right, quick 10 seconds, if you will. Sarah, what was the security situation? What it's been like so far driving into the town and, over there at the polling units you've seen?
Security is watertight, particularly at the border towns, right? So for the polling units, you may see that the policeman officer, of course, is trying to control the crowd. It's really difficult for them because most of these police officers are not like police officers who are stationed here. They were brought in, deployed from the state capital, and you have that. So having to communicate with the residents, having to get them to abide by the rules of the engagement, having to get them to stay on a proper queue is difficult for the police officers, and that's what was observed in most of the polling units. It was just in one polling unit where we saw a really structured, not really structured, right? A semi-structured arrangement where you had the polling area clearly defined, but most of the polling units where we visited, the voting area is not really defined. You have this crowd of voters overcrowding, like, of course, almost choking the INEC ad hoc staff. And so if you are an INEC ad hoc staff at this point in most of these polling units, it's a really tough job for them because they have to control the crowd. They have to ensure that the process is credible and fair, So it's really difficult for the INEC ad hoc staff. But the security operatives, I'll say they are doing what they can to ensure that the process is peaceful, which is what they have been told to do.
All right, Sarah Yeko, that'll be all for now. Thanks for the updates. We'll reach back for more from your end. Stay safe. All right, back to the studio. We've held on to Mr. Biodu Showumi, and we'll be letting you go in a few minutes from now.
Okay.
But for our Yoruba-speaking audience, they must have caught, what the old woman said.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard, but she said she got something. She was even being nudged by a younger woman who was saying, don't say it.
Don't say it.
Don't say it. But, we heard that. And what do you make of that?
No, she was actually referring to inducement. She obviously made up her mind who to vote for. But she made a point that she was induced. She got paid for it. And she didn't mind. If you look at the environment, she obviously, in my view, I think she's poor. And you can see that. And our whole emphasis is on food. Bring down the cost of food. And of course, many people can relate to our viewpoint on that because life is a bit very challenging. And for her, that inducement will help, to bring down, at least to allow her to be able to purchase some few things. But what she has not internalized is the fact that we need to go back to the farm. Government can do so much. We, on our own part, need to resolve to go back to the farm.
Exactly.
Except we produce what we eat, we will continue to be in this situation. If you go all over particularly Southwest, you see so many fertile land untapped. And families will tell you, oh, we own the land. Okay, you own the land. So
what are you doing about it?
What are you doing with it? If you're not tapping it and you're sitting at home hoping that the index inflation will come down without you producing food to bring down the food inflation, then, unfortunately, it won't work. But that's our understanding of it.
Okay. And by the way, to our viewers following, these are live pictures still from Igbotaku local government area where our correspondent Sarah Yeko, has been for the past couple of minutes, where she has been speaking with us, giving us updates. We're seeing people making brisk business. Of course, that's one of the common scenes you see at polling units. Of course, people are there. Some have cast their votes. Some are still in the queue. It's a bit rowdy. From Sarah's report, we are also seeing some scenes to that effect. But then it looks busy during the window of voting. That people are allowed to come and vote at this time, and in the next one more hour or thereabouts, that will be it for voting. Counting will commence afterwards, and all the other stages of the voting process. All right, sights and sounds from Igbotako, that's within the Okitipupa local government area of Ondo State, one of the local government areas in the state where, of course, elections are ongoing. Of course, the whole of Ondo State, it's safe to say the whole of Ondo State elections are ongoing, and so far so good. We will continue to monitor all the happenings over there in Ondo State, what with our several personnel who are bringing us crucial updates at the moment. But then what can we say about our analysts, especially Biodun Shoumi? We thank you very much for staying with us and helping our viewers to make sense of it's a familiar phenomenon, but then every election brings in new feels and new insights, and we thank you very much for being with us during this experience.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Of course, we still have Jide Ojo and Adewale Adeoye who are joining us from Abuja. We'll take a break now, and then there will be much more from our end. Of course, Mr. Ojo, Mr. Adeoye will still be very much on ground to help us in our course. Stay with us on TVC News.
Well organized. The turnout is massive.
It's been very peaceful so far. I'm very excited with what I've seen so far. The turnout is massive, is encouraging.
organized. The turnout is massive.
You're watching TVC News now, and we are having seen live pictures from Akure, where any moment from now, Yaga team, that's one of the election monitoring team, the independent election observers, are billed to address the press and give preliminary assessment of the conduct of the governorship election in Ondo State. We will connect with them. As we can see, they are getting set to address concerns and give general assessment of the election so far.
Right, we have Paul James, the program manager for elections, Yaga Africa, and to address us this afternoon, we have Chief Ezenwawagu.
All right, that's those are live pictures from Akure in Ondo State. As part of all the activities, the crucial activities that make up the election cycle, Yaga Africa is set to address the press, and any moment from now, we will connect with them to hear firsthand what their assessment is so far. Let's get back now, get some more reactions from our analysts at this time, Jude Ojo and Adewale Adeoye. Mr. Ojo, let's speak again about this concept of vote buying. I don't know if you followed the conversation between our reporter and one of the voters. Are we fighting a lost cause, basically? Yes. Okay, so you come to the point where I know who I want to vote for. But then, someone now comes and reaches out, gives something. Help us understand it really. Where is the inducement? I don't know if there was any inducement there, but what did you see?
Well, voter inducement has been explained earlier on, is a global phenomenon that is not peculiar to Nigeria. And in Nigeria, where the political elite or the political class have weaponized poverty, people are in such a helpless and hopeless situation that it's very difficult to convince them not to accept any form of inducement. As someone who has worked in this sector for over 25 years and who have engaged in voter education for that length of time, people always ask me after every workshop where you try to train them or sensitize them against vote buying. They will tell you, if I don't collect, do I have opportunity to see this person in another 4 years? Look at the road that leads to the front of my place. Look at the community school. Look at the infrastructure.
Okay,
what
Mr. Ojo,
have they done?
Let's put you on hold. We understand that the Yaga press conference has kicked off. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. But then let's hear what Yaga is saying right now.
In the governorship elections, additionally, the Independent National Electoral Commission and the Transport Union Group successfully deployed election officials and materials across the state. By 7:30 a.m., election officials had arrived at 71% of the polling units. And by 9:30 a.m., accreditation and voting were underway in 91% of the observed polling units. Yaga Africa observed widespread occurrence of vote buying across several polling units, which is becoming a permanent feature of our election. We strongly condemn this practice as it contributes to electoral corruption and political inequality. We commend the Department of State Security, DSS, for apprehending an individual allegedly involved in vote trading